They told you that strength comes from positivity, from gratitude journals, from telling yourself every morning that you are enough, that if you believe hard enough, if you visualize long enough, the world will bend to you. That is the lie they fed you, and you have been choking on it for years. The Stoics did not build empires, survive torture, or outlast tyrants by believing in themselves. They built something far more dangerous than belief. They built a mind that could not be broken, not by failure, not by betrayal, not by death itself. Epictetus was a slave. Marcus Aurelius ruled the known world and still described himself as a man at constant war with his own weakness. Seneca watched emperors try to destroy him and wrote his greatest letters from the edge of execution. These men did not meditate in candlelit rooms. They forged themselves in furnaces. What I am about to show you is not self-help. It is not therapy. It is the operating system that separates the sovereign from the slave. 7 habits. 7 precise psychological weapons the Stoics used, and that every modern system has deliberately softened, distorted, and diluted into uselessness. If you are not ready for this, close the video. Go back to the crowd. But if you want to know the truth, stay. You were brainwashed to believe that mental strength is built through comfort, that the goal of life is to feel good, to reduce friction, to optimize happiness. School taught you to memorize, comply, and wait for permission. Religion taught you that suffering is punishment. Social media taught you that your worst moments should be hidden and your best moments performed. And in that conditioning, something in you was systematically destroyed: your tolerance for reality. Machiavelli understood this. He wrote in The Prince, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." He was not speaking only of political survival. He was describing the architecture of a mind that refuses to be prey, a mind that sees the world as it is, not as it should be, not as your therapist wants you to feel about it. Robert Greene encoded the same truth into the 48 Laws of Power. Power is not given. It is seized through self-mastery, through patience, through the ruthless management of your own psychology. The Stoics arrived at this 2,000 years before either of them. I am going to show you their 7 habits. But be warned, these are not habits you adopt to feel better. These are habits you adopt to become something most people will never understand. Phase 1. Kill your reactions before they kill your power. Your emotions are not your identity. They are signals. And right now, you are letting signals command the general. The average man believes emotional expression is authenticity, that showing how you feel is courage. It is not. It is a broadcast of your vulnerabilities to every person in the room who knows how to use them. The Stoics called this the discipline of assent, the gap between stimulus and response. Modern psychology calls it emotional regulation, and Viktor Frankl, who survived Auschwitz, built an entire philosophy around it. Between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies your freedom. Marcus Aurelius embodied this completely. Ruling an empire while his children died, while generals betrayed him, while plague decimated his armies, he did not erupt. He wrote. He processed in private. In public, he presented stone. The instruction.
The next time you feel the urge to react, to defend yourself, to explain yourself, to correct someone in real time, pause. Count. 5 seconds of silence. Let them finish. Then speak, or do not speak, but choose it. Never perform it. Because if you cannot govern your own reactions, what makes you think you can govern anything else? Phase 2. Voluntary suffering is the forge. Comfort is not rest. Comfort is atrophy. 99% of people organize their entire lives around the avoidance of discomfort. They pick the easier route, the softer conversation, the familiar failure, and they wonder why they feel hollow. The Stoics practiced Premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of evil, the deliberate, regular contemplation of loss, failure, pain, and death, not as pessimism, as preparation, as inoculation. Modern psychology validates this through exposure therapy, the clinical process of deliberately confronting feared stimuli to reduce their power. The mechanism is identical. The Stoics simply applied it to the whole of life. Cato the Younger took this further than most would dare. A Roman senator, one of the most powerful men alive, he regularly wore rags in public, deliberately exposing himself to ridicule, to cold, to hunger. Not because he had to, because he refused to let comfort become his master. The cold path forward. Choose one discomfort per day, deliberately. Not the discomfort life forces on you, the discomfort you choose. Cold water, the hard conversation, the work you have been avoiding. Voluntary suffering is the only suffering that makes you stronger. What happens when you can no longer choose the suffering? When life imposes it without your consent? Phase 3. Die every night and rise reconstructed. Memento mori. Remember that you will die. Not as a depressing thought, as a blade you sharpen yourself against every single day. The average man lives in denial of death. He postpones, delays, distracts. And in his denial, he also postpones living, taking the risks, making the choices, becoming the thing he was capable of becoming. Behavioral science has a name for this: terror management theory, developed by Greenberg, Solomon, and Paszynski. The core finding is damning. Virtually all conformity, status-seeking, and identity performance is driven by unconscious terror of death. Most people spend their entire lives managing that terror instead of confronting it. The Stoics confronted it nightly. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. Not with despair, with clarity." Napoleon understood the same principle from a military angle. He made decisions by first imagining his own defeat, his death on the battlefield, his empire collapsed, and worked backward from there. The worst case as the baseline. The death of the plan before the plan began. The instruction is simple and uncomfortable. Tonight, before you sleep, sit with the fact that you will die. Not one day. One day means never. Acknowledge it as a real and approaching event. Then ask what you would do differently tomorrow. Most will skip this habit, and that is exactly why most people never truly live. You are still here. Good. The fragile ones already left. Comment below. I choose the cold path. Not for me. As a record, an anchor. A line in the sand between who you were before this video and who you are building now. Phase 4. Love what destroys you. This is the one that will cost you the most resistance. Amor fati. Love of fate. Not acceptance, not tolerance. Love. Every setback, every betrayal, every failure. Not something to endure and move past, but something to consume like fuel. Nietzsche called it the formula for greatness. The Stoics lived it centuries before him. The psychological mechanism is what Carol Dweck at Stanford calls the growth mindset, the empirically demonstrated difference between people who interpret adversity as information versus those who interpret it as condemnation. But the Stoic version is colder and more absolute than Dweck's framework. It does not say, learn from failure. It says, the failure was necessary. Nothing else was possible, and therefore it must be used.
Admiral James Stockdale spent 7 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. Tortured repeatedly, isolated. He survived, not through optimism, but through iron acceptance of his situation combined with unbreakable certainty about his ultimate outcome. He called it the Stockdale paradox. Confront the brutal facts and never lose faith. He had read Epictetus before the war. In the prison camp, he applied it surgically. The instruction? Take the thing you most resent right now, a loss, a rejection, a failure, and write 3 ways it was the correct outcome for your development. Not forced positivity, cold analysis. What did this failure kill in you that needed to die? Phase 5. The Fortress of Indifference. Your need for approval is the chain around your neck. You were trained from childhood to seek validation, from parents, teachers, peers, followers. That training did not stop when you became an adult. It migrated into every professional relationship, every social performance, every metric you measure yourself by. The Stoics called the antidote eudaimonia, flourishing based on virtue and internal standard alone. Robert Greene encoded it into the 48 Laws as Law 10. Avoid the unhappy and the unlucky, and Law 36. Disdain things you cannot have. The underlying architecture is identical. Your internal metric must be sovereign over external judgment. Galileo Galilei understood what happens when you abandon this principle. He recanted his scientific findings under pressure from the Inquisition to save his life. A pragmatic choice. But the man who had seen the truth through his own telescope allowed the crowd to define his reality, and reportedly spent his remaining years unable to forgive himself for it. The astronomer who bent to the mob became less than the slave who bent willingly. The cold instruction: identify one area of your life where you are performing for an audience that does not matter. A behavior, a habit, a social presentation. Eliminate it this week. Do not announce it. Do not explain it. Simply stop. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is a fortress. What is the price of building that fortress? Phase 6. Cut what you cannot control like dead weight. The dichotomy of control, the most foundational Stoic principle, and the most violently ignored. Epictetus stated it without mercy. Some things are in our power, and others are not. In our power, opinion, impulse, desire, aversion. Not in our power, body, reputation, property, the judgments of others. 99% of human suffering is generated by the refusal to accept this. People spend decades fighting outcomes they cannot control. The opinions of enemies, the behavior of the faithless, the verdict of the market.
And in that fight, they exhaust the very energy they need to master the few things actually within reach. Modern psychology calls the underlying failure an external locus of control, a concept developed by Julian Rotter. The research is unambiguous. Those who attribute outcomes to external forces report higher anxiety, lower resilience, and lower achievement across every measured domain. The Stoics diagnosed this pathology 2,000 years before Rotter named it. Caesar understood the boundary with brutal pragmatism. He spent zero energy managing his reputation with senators determined to hate him. He spent all his energy on strategy, execution, and the management of his own psychology. When the Senate turned, he did not attempt to persuade them. He crossed the Rubicon. The instruction? Make a list today. 2 columns. Left, everything consuming your mental energy. Right, which of these you actually control. Everything in the right column gets your full energy. Everything in the left column gets cut. Not reduced, cut. Phase 7. The daily audit that keeps you from lying to yourself. The final habit, the most unglamorous, the most powerful. Every night, the Stoics performed an examination of conscience, a cold, systematic audit of the day. Seneca wrote, "I examine my entire day and go back over what I've done and said, hiding nothing from myself." Not journaling for emotional release, not gratitude lists, a surgical review. Where did I fail today? Where did I let impulse govern me? Where did I perform instead of act? Psychological research on self-monitoring, developed by Mark Snyder at the University of Minnesota, shows that individuals who consistently observe and regulate their own behavior demonstrate significantly higher levels of goal achievement, adaptability, and social effectiveness. The Stoics were running the same protocol, with higher standards than any modern framework would demand. Marcus Aurelius ran this audit for decades. The meditations were not written for publication. They were a private record of his failures. A Roman emperor, the most powerful man alive, holding himself to a standard he never claimed to have fully reached. The fortress was always under construction. 3 questions. Tonight, write them. Where did I react when I should have responded? What did I avoid that I should have confronted? Who did I perform for instead of act for? Read them tomorrow morning. Begin again. Here is the truth you need to hear before this ends. This path is cold. Genuinely, mercilessly cold. The man who builds a mind like this will not be understood by most people around him. His consistency will be mistaken for arrogance, his silence for coldness. His refusal to seek approval will cost him relationships. His acceptance of fate will isolate him from the crowd that needs someone to blame. The wolf does not explain himself to the sheep, but the wolf also eats alone. Machiavelli wrote The Prince, stripped of his government post, accused of conspiracy, arrested, tortured on the strappado, his arms pulled behind his back until his shoulders gave, exiled to a farm outside Florence. He had nothing, no power, no audience, no certainty that the work would survive him. And in that cold, in that exile, in that nothing, he wrote the document that changed how power has been understood for 5 centuries. He did not need the throne to think like a king. Neither do you. This freedom is cold. It is lonely. It will cost you things you were not prepared to lose.
but it is the only freedom that is truly yours. You made it to the end. That already separates you from most people who clicked on this video. Not because the content was difficult to watch, because it was difficult to accept. Most people need comfort more than they need truth. You stayed.
These 7 habits are not a checklist. They are a system. A total psychological reconstruction that you do not complete, you practice daily, without applause, without recognition, without a finish line.
If this channel is where you come not for entertainment or motivation, but for the kind of thinking that genuinely reshapes how you move through the world, subscribe. Not because I asked you to. Subscribe because you are done being prey. And if you want what I cannot say publicly, the frameworks, the deeper material, the work the algorithm suppresses, that is behind the membership. The door is there. You know where it is. There is a version of you on the other side of this work. You have not met him yet. Start tonight.